Living in Oak Ridge Estates seemed like a dream come true when I first moved in 3 years ago. The manicured lawns, the community pool, and the peaceful cul-de-sacs painted the perfect suburban picture. What the realtor conveniently failed to mention was the iron fist of the Homeowners Association, or more specifically, its self-appointed enforcer Barbara Winfield. I'm Alex Reynolds, 34, software developer and accidental revolutionary in the war against HOA tyranny. Working from home gave me a front-row seat to Barbara's daily patrols. You could set your watch by her rounds, 9 a.m. and 2 p.m., clipboard in hand, measuring grass height and documenting unsanctioned bird feeders with the precision of a military operation. My first run-in with Garage Patrol Barbara happened just 2 weeks after moving in. A strongly worded notice taped to my door informed me that my trash can remain visible from the street for approximately 37 minutes after the designated removal time frame. The letter was signed with a flourish and included a grainy time-stamped photo as evidence. Welcome to the neighborhood. Over the next 3 years, I'd received citations for Christmas lights left up 2 days past January 6th, a garden hose not properly coiled in an aesthetically pleasing manner, and my personal favorite, a wreath whose diameter exceeded the approved door decoration size by a whopping half-inch. But today, Barbara crossed the unforgivable line. It started as an ordinary Tuesday. I've been coding since dawn, trying to meet a deadline that my client had already moved up twice. By noon, my caffeine levels were dangerously low, and my pantry looked like the aftermath of a zombie apocalypse. Grocery run it was. The trip to Trader Joe's was quick, in and out in 20 minutes. When I returned, bags of groceries balancing precariously in both arms, I pulled into my driveway and hit the garage door opener on my visor. As the door groaned upward, something seemed off. The space looked occupied. There, in my garage, sat a gleaming white Lexus SUV that definitely wasn't mine. The groceries almost slipped from my grasp as confusion gave way to disbelief. What the actual? I muttered, setting the bags down on my driveway. I circled the vehicle like a detective at a crime scene. The personalized license plate reading WNFLD1 confirmed my suspicions before I even saw the My Child is an Honor Student and Proud HOA Member bumper stickers. This was Barbara Winfield's car. Barbara Winfield had parked her car in my garage. My garage. I checked my phone, wondering if I'd missed some notice about driveway inspections or garage maintenance. Nothing. I glanced at neighboring houses, half expecting to see other garages commandeered by the HOA police. Nothing unusual there either. This was personal. I couldn't even pull my own car in now. I was forced to park on the street, something Barbara had cited others for when they did it longer than the allowed 3-hour window. The irony wasn't lost on me. Taking my groceries inside, I noticed a small piece of paper that had been slipped under my front door. The familiar letterhead made my stomach tighten. Notice of emergency HOA meeting Tuesday 1 p.m. at the community center. Attendance mandatory for committee members. Duration, approximately 3 hours. Agenda, discussion of pool area renovations and updated paint color palette enforcement. It was signed by Barbara Winfield, HOA president. The time was now 1:15 p.m. Barbara was at her meeting, a meeting that would last until at least 4 p.m., while her car sat smugly in my garage. I called the HOA office, but got the automated message. Our office is currently closed for the monthly board meeting. If this is an emergency, please contact your district representative. My district representative? Barbara Winfield. I considered my options. I could wait outside the community center and confront her publicly. I could call a tow truck. I could leave a strongly worded note of my own on her windshield. Or my eyes drifted to the garage door opener sitting on my kitchen counter. A plan began forming in my mind, a plan so simple yet so perfectly aligned with poetic justice that I couldn't help but smile. Barbara had parked in my garage without permission. What if she suddenly found herself unable to remove her car when she wanted to? You see, my garage door has a quirk. The electronic opener is the only way to operate it. There's no manual release accessible from the outside, a security feature according to the previous homeowner, though more likely an installation defect no one bothered to fix. Once that door is down, it doesn't go up without the opener or access from inside the house. I pressed the button on the garage door opener. The mechanism whirred to life, and I watched with satisfaction as the door descended, enclosing Barbara's pristine Lexus in its concrete tomb. Just to be safe, I took photos documenting the car in my garage with timestamps. Then I decided to check my security camera footage to see exactly when and how this invasion had occurred. The footage showed Barbara pulling into my driveway at 12:37 p.m., just minutes after I'd left. She tried my front door first, then looked at her watch impatiently. She appeared to make a phone call, speaking animatedly while gesturing at my house. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled out what looked like a universal garage door opener, pointed it at my garage, and after a few attempts, my door responded. The footage continued with Barbara pulling her car into my garage, closing the door behind her, and then leaving on foot, straightening her blazer as she walked briskly toward the community center. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This was deliberate. I felt a surge of indignation. Over the years, I'd put up with Barbara's nitpicking and rule enforcement. I'd paid the occasional fine without complaint. I'd even repainted my front door when the color was deemed nautical blue instead of the approved ocean navy. But this was trespassing. This was an invasion of private property. This crossed every line of neighborly conduct and common decency. I made myself a sandwich and contemplated my next move. Barbara clearly had some sort of universal remote that worked on my garage frequency. That was concerning on multiple levels and definitely something I'd need to address with a security upgrade. But for now, I had the upper hand. Barbara's precious Lexus was locked in my garage, and the only way to free it was with my opener. I decided to make myself scarce. I packed up my laptop, planning to work from the coffee shop across town for the afternoon. As I was about to leave, my neighbor Theo Jackson, a retired postal worker with a passion for birdwatching and neighborhood gossip, called out from his porch. "Afternoon, Alex. Say, did Barbara finally convince you to upgrade your car? Saw her parking that fancy SUV in your garage earlier. Though I gotta say, it doesn't seem like your style," he chuckled. "No, Theo, that's actually Barbara's car. Seems she needed a place to park while at the HOA meeting," I replied, carefully neutral. Theo's eyebrows shot up. "She's using your garage without asking? That's rich coming from the woman who fined the Goldsteins for lending their driveway to their daughter while she was visiting last Christmas." I shrugged. "Maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation, and maybe my pet rock will sprout wings," Theo snorted. "You gonna call her on it? I'm sure we'll connect later," I said with a smile that Theo definitely misinterpreted as good neighborly forgiveness. "Well, you're a better person than me," Theo said, shaking his head. "If it were my garage, I'd have some choice words for Madam President." I waved goodbye to Theo, knowing word would spread quickly through the neighborhood grapevine. Barbara's unexplained parking would be common knowledge before dinner. As I drove to the coffee shop, my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Reynolds, your vehicle is improperly parked on the street directly in front of your property. Please move it to your garage or driveway immediately to avoid violation of HOA Code 7.3.b. Winfield, HOA President." I nearly swerved off the road reading it. The audacity was breathtaking. Barbara was actually citing me for not using my garage, the very garage she had commandeered. That settled it. Any lingering guilt about my plan evaporated instantly. I typed a quick reply. "Ms. Winfield, unfortunately, my garage is currently occupied by an unauthorized vehicle. I've documented this trespass and am considering my options, including contacting local authorities." And Reynolds. I turned my phone to silent and continued to the coffee shop, mind spinning with the anticipation of what would unfold when Barbara's meeting ended at 4 p.m. and she discovered her transportation situation. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait. The coffee shop was buzzing with the afternoon crowd when I settled into a corner table. I ordered an overpriced latte and opened my laptop, pretending to focus on work while my mind kept drifting to the Lexus imprisoned in my garage. The clock on my screen read 2:17 p.m. Barbara's meeting wouldn't end for almost 2 more hours. A part of me questioned if I was taking things too far. Was locking someone's car in my garage crossing a line? Then again, Barbara had crossed that line first by entering my property without permission. What was it she always said at HOA meetings? Rules exist for a reason, and actions have consequences. Time for Barbara Winfield to experience some consequences of her own. I pulled up the app connected to my home security system and checked the garage camera. The Lexus sat there silently, its glossy white finish reflecting the overhead lights. Nothing had changed. I switched to the front door camera just in time to see Harold Winfield, Barbara's husband, approaching my porch. Harold was a tall, thin man with perpetually hunched shoulders, the physical manifestation of living 30 years under Barbara's thumb. Unlike his domineering wife, Harold was generally pleasant, if somewhat meek. He was retired from some corporate job and now spent most of his time tending to his award-winning roses and avoiding HOA drama. I watched as Harold rang my doorbell 3 times, waited, then tried knocking. After a minute, he pulled out his phone, presumably calling me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I let it go to voicemail. Harold left a message and then retreated down my walkway, glancing back at the house with a worried expression. Curious, I played the voicemail. "Hi, Alex. This is Harold Winfield, Barbara's husband. There seems to be some confusion about parking arrangements today. If you could call me back at your earliest convenience, I'd appreciate it. Thank you." Confusion about parking arrangements? That suggested Barbara had told Harold she had permission to use my garage. The plot thickened. I decided to prepare for the inevitable confrontation by documenting everything. I downloaded the security footage showing Barbara using what appeared to be a universal remote to access my garage, saved our text exchange, and even wrote down a timeline of events while they were fresh in my memory. As I was putting the finishing touches on my documentation, my phone erupted with a series of texts. 3:02 p.m. Barbara. "Mr. Reynolds, please respond immediately regarding your garage." 3:05 p.m. Barbara. "This is becoming a serious inconvenience. The HOA meeting ended early." 3:08 p.m. Barbara. "I have another engagement at 3:30. This is unprofessional." 3:12 p.m. Barbara. "I'm giving you 10 minutes to respond before I take further action." So the meeting had ended early. Interesting. I switched back to my security feed and saw Barbara standing in my driveway, phone in hand, face flushed with anger. She marched to my front door and jabbed at the doorbell repeatedly. When that yielded no response, she began photographing my house and her car in the garage from various angles. I should have felt guilty, but instead, I felt a strange thrill. For 3 years, I jumped at Barbara's every command, scrambling to avoid fines and public shaming at HOA meetings. Now the tables had turned, and I found the role reversal oddly satisfying. At 3:25 p.m., Harold returned, this time with a teenage boy I recognized as their grandson, Tyler. The 16-year-old had Barbara's imperious nose but seemed to have inherited none of her personality, based on the few interactions I'd had with him. I watched as Tyler examined the garage door, apparently looking for a manual release or alternative entry point. Finding none, he shrugged helplessly at his grandmother, who threw her hands up in exasperation. My phone rang again, Harold. This time I decided to answer, but planned to play dumb. "Hello," I said, making sure to sound distracted. "Alex, it's Harold Winfield. Thank goodness you picked up. We have a situation with Barbara's car in your garage." "My garage? What do you mean?" Harold paused. "Barbara's car is in your garage, and we can't get it out. She says you two had an arrangement." "An arrangement? This is the first I'm hearing about it. I've been at a coffee shop working all afternoon. How did her car even get in there?" Another pause. "She said she spoke with you this morning about using your garage since it was closer to the community center for the meeting." "Harold, I never had any such conversation with Barbara. In fact, I found a note from her about the HOA meeting, came home to find her car in my garage, and she even texted me a citation for parking on the street in front of my own house, because my garage was occupied by her car." "Oh," Harold said softly. "I see." In the background, I could hear Barbara demanding the phone. Harold must have covered the microphone because their exchange was muffled, but I distinctly heard him say, "You told me you had permission." When Harold came back on the line, his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Alex, I apologize for the confusion. Would it be possible for you to return home to open the garage? Barbara has a doctor's appointment at 4 o'clock that she can't miss." I made a show of sighing heavily. "I'm right in the middle of a critical work project, Harold. I can't just drop everything because Barbara's decided to use my garage without asking. I'll be home around 6 o'clock, my normal end of work day. But her appointment is not my emergency," I finished firmly. Perhaps she should have thought about her schedule before parking in someone else's garage without permission, or before citing me for parking on the street when she's the reason I couldn't use my own garage. The line went quiet for a moment. Then, to my surprise, Harold chuckled softly. Well, when you put it that way, I understand. We'll figure something out. Before hanging up, I added, by the way, Harold, I'm curious, how did Barbara get the garage open in the first place? She has a multi-frequency remote for inspections, Harold replied, hesitation in his voice. For emergency access. Is using other residents' garages for personal parking considered an emergency HOA function? Another pause. I'll see you at 6 o'clock, Alex. The line went dead. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process this new information. Barbara had a master remote that could open any garage in the neighborhood? That seemed like a massive invasion of privacy and potential security risk. I wondered how many other residents knew about this emergency access capability. Checking my security feed again, I saw Barbara engaged in an animated phone conversation while Harold stood by, arms crossed. Tyler had retreated to sit on my front steps, looking thoroughly bored with the adult drama unfolding. At 3:45 p.m., a new player entered the scene. A tow truck pulled up in front of my house, and a burly driver emerged. I turned up the volume on my security feed to listen in. You called about a vehicle extraction? The driver asked, approaching Barbara. Yes, Barbara replied crisply. My car is trapped in this garage, and the homeowner is unreachable. The driver surveyed the situation. So you want me to, what exactly? Break into the garage. If necessary, Barbara confirmed. This is an emergency situation. The driver scratched his head. Ma'am, I can't just break into someone's property. That would be destruction of private property, maybe even breaking and entering. I need the homeowner's permission. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, Barbara declared, drawing herself up to her full height. I have authority to access any property in this community for emergency purposes. The driver looked unimpressed. HOA president doesn't override state law, ma'am. Unless you've got a court order or proof this is your property, I can't help you. Best I can do is tow your other car if you need a ride somewhere. Barbara's face flushed deep red. This is outrageous. Do you know who I am in this community? Don't know, don't particularly care, the driver replied, returning to his truck. Call us back when you've got the homeowner's permission or a police report. He drove away, leaving Barbara sputtering on my driveway. I had to stifle a laugh. The mighty Barbara Winfield, used to commanding obedience with a flick of her HOA citation pad, was discovering the limits of her power. Looking at the time, I realized I'd been watching this drama unfold for over an hour. My actual work deadline was still looming, so I forced myself to focus on coding for the next hour, only occasionally checking the security feed. By 5 p.m., a small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, pretending to walk dogs or check mail while stealing glances at the ongoing situation. Barbara had retreated to Harold's car, presumably to escape the growing audience, while Harold continued making calls. Tyler had left, probably driven home or to a friend's house by another relative. I decided it was time to head home, though I planned to arrive right at 6 o'clock as promised, not a minute earlier. Before leaving the coffee shop, I received one more text from Barbara. Mr. Reynolds, this situation has escalated beyond simple misunderstanding. Your refusal to return to your residence is resulting in significant hardship and may constitute harassment. The HOA board will be reviewing this incident at our next meeting. I strongly advise you to reconsider your current course of action. I responded with my first and only text. Ms. Winfield, I have video evidence of you using an unauthorized remote to access my garage without permission, followed by you citing me for not using said garage. I look forward to sharing this documentation at the next HOA meeting. See you at 6 o'clock. I put my phone on silent again, packed up my laptop, and left the coffee shop. Instead of going straight home, I decided to treat myself to a leisurely dinner at my favorite restaurant. After all, Barbara had inconvenienced me. It seemed only fair to return the favor. As I enjoyed my meal, I kept tabs on the situation through my security app. The neighbor crowd had dispersed as dinner time approached, but Harold remained, sitting patiently on my front steps. Barbara was no longer visible. Perhaps she'd found alternative transportation to her appointment. At precisely 5:55 p.m., I pulled onto my street. Several neighbors paused their evening activities to watch my arrival, poorly disguising their interest in the neighborhood drama. Theo, my retired neighbor, actually gave me a thumbs up from his porch. I parked on the street and approached my house, where Harold stood to greet me. Up close, he looked exhausted, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. Alex, he nodded. Thank you for coming. Where's Barbara? I asked, noticing her absence. Our daughter picked her up for her appointment, Harold replied. She'll come back for the car later. I see, I said, unlocking my front door. I assume you'd like me to open the garage now? Harold nodded, following me inside. As we walked through my living room toward the internal garage access, he spoke quietly. I want to apologize for today's misunderstanding. Barbara sometimes gets carried away with her HOA responsibilities. Is that what this was? An HOA responsibility. Harold had the grace to look embarrassed. No. She was running late for the meeting and didn't want to walk from the visitor parking area. Your house was closest, and she had made an assumption that she could use my garage without asking. That's quite an assumption. Yes, well, Harold sighed. Barbara has been used to getting her way in this neighborhood for a long time. Perhaps too long. I pressed the garage door opener, and the mechanism whirred to life, raising the door to reveal the gleaming Lexus, still perfectly parked and unmoved after its 5-hour captivity. Harold moved toward the car, then paused. For what it's worth, I don't think she'll be using that master remote anymore. This afternoon has been educational for her. I raised an eyebrow. Educational enough that she won't bring this up at the next HOA meeting? A small smile played at the corners of Harold's mouth. Let's just say I've reminded her that her position as HOA president comes up for vote next month, and this incident wouldn't reflect well on her campaign if widely discussed. He got into the Lexus and started the engine. As the car backed out of my garage, I couldn't help but feel this wasn't the end of my conflict with Barbara Winfield. It might even be just the beginning. What I didn't realize was just how spectacularly karma was about to catch up with Garage Patrol Barbara, and how my simple act of defiance would spark a neighborhood revolution. I thought the garage incident would blow over after a few days. I was wrong. It was just the beginning of Barbara Winfield's spectacular downfall. The morning after the garage standoff, I was enjoying my coffee when my doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was Dwayne Ortega, the owner of Ortega's Towing and Recovery. At 45, with forearms like tree trunks and neatly trimmed beard, Dwayne looked exactly like you'd expect a tow truck company owner to look. You Alex Reynolds, he asked. That's me, I replied, confused. Can I help you? Actually, I'm here to thank you, Dwayne said with a grin. That HOA lady who called me yesterday, she's been trying to get my trucks towed from my own driveway for months because they're commercial vehicles. Even though I got a variance when I moved in, I remembered helping Dwayne about a month ago when Barbara had left a citation on his personal truck. I found the original variance documentation in the public HOA records and emailed it to him. Happy to help, I said. Did she call you again after I left yesterday? Oh yeah, Dwayne chuckled. Around 8 p.m. Demanded emergency service for her unlawfully imprisoned vehicle. Said she'd report me to the Better Business Bureau if I didn't come immediately. And did you? Sure, did. Charged her the after-hours emergency rate, too. Triple the normal fee. His smile widened. And wouldn't you know, getting that fancy SUV out was tricky. Might have scratched the side panel a bit. Nothing major, just enough to need a $3,000 repair job. I try not to laugh. That's unfortunate, isn't it? Dwayne winked. Anyway, word's spreading about what happened. Thought you should know you've got fans in the neighborhood. After Dwayne left, I checked the community Facebook group. Sure enough, there were vague posts about certain HOA members abusing power and karma finally catching up. One neighbor had even started a poll about HOA reform that was gaining traction. 3 days later, Harold Winfield appeared at my door again. Alex, we need to talk, he said, looking nervously over his shoulder. Things are escalating. Over coffee at my kitchen table, Harold revealed that Barbara had been planning to propose a new fine at the next HOA meeting, specifically targeting unauthorized security cameras like mine. But her plan had backfired spectacularly when board member Lucia Patel asked a simple question. How did Barbara get into my garage in the first place? She had to admit she has a universal remote, Harold explained. That's when everything unraveled. Turns out Barbara has been entering people's garages and backyards for years, always claiming it was for inspections, but never with proper notice. That can't be legal, I said. It's not. And that's just the beginning, Harold continued, lowering his voice. The board started looking into other complaints. They found Barbara has been collecting unauthorized rush processing fees for approval requests. Cash only, no receipts. I sat back stunned. She's been embezzling from the HOA? Over $15,000 in the past 2 years, Harold confirmed. I had no idea. She told me it was bonus payments for her exemplary service. He looked genuinely devastated. Then came the most shocking revelation, my security footage. Someone, Harold wouldn't say who, had obtained a clip of Barbara using her master remote and shared it in the neighborhood group chat. The footage went viral among residents, spawning memes and even a slow-motion edit set to dramatic music. There's an emergency HOA meeting tomorrow night, Harold finished. They're voting on whether to remove Barbara as president. The meeting was standing room only. Residents who hadn't attended in years showed up, eager to witness Barbara's reckoning. I sat in the back, trying to be inconspicuous, but several neighbors patted my shoulder or gave me knowing nods. Barbara entered with her head held high, clutching her precious binder of HOA regulations. She looked confident until she saw the turnout. Her steps faltered momentarily before she took her seat at the front table. Vice President Lucia Patel, a 61-year-old retired judge who Barbara had harassed for months over her garden gnome collection, called a meeting to order. What followed was 2 hours of methodical dismantling of Barbara's HOA reign. Financial records were presented. Witness testimonies were heard. My garage footage was shown on the meeting room projector, alongside similar incidents from other homeowners. Most damning was the testimony from Barbara's husband, Harold. My wife has used the master remote to enter at least 7 garages in the past month alone, he stated, not meeting Barbara's outraged gaze, including using Alex Reynolds' garage for her personal convenience while attending our last meeting. The vote was unanimous. Barbara Winfield was removed as HOA president, with Lucia Patel elected as interim replacement. Barbara stormed out, refusing to surrender her binder, while the room erupted in applause. The epilogue to this saga came a week later. Every Thursday at 7 p.m., Barbara had always left for her book club. But on the first Thursday after her ousting, she found herself unable to leave. 4 cars had mysteriously parked in her driveway, blocking her garage entirely. The same thing happened the following Thursday. And the next. No one ever claimed responsibility, though Theo from across the street always seemed to be gardening with a perfect view whenever it happened. The cars were always gone by morning, and despite Barbara's furious complaints, no one was ever caught. Under Lucia's leadership, the HOA transformed. Reasonable enforcement replaced Barbara's tyranny. The master remotes were destroyed. New transparency rules were implemented. As for me, I gained an unexpected reputation as the catalyst for positive change. Neighbors who'd never spoken to me before stopped to chat. I was invited to block parties and community events. Even Barbara eventually came around in her own way. After 3 months of car blockades, she approached me at the community pool. "Mr. Reynolds," she said stiffly, "I may have been overzealous in my enforcement of community standards." Coming from Barbara, this was practically a tearful apology. "Water under the bridge," I replied. The car blockade stopped after that. Barbara joined a gardening club and channeled her energy into growing prize-winning dahlias instead of hunting for violations. Harold seemed happier than I'd ever seen him. Sometimes the smallest acts of resistance create the biggest waves of change. In my case, it was simply closing a garage door at exactly the right moment and keeping the opener out of Barbara Winfield's reach.